and Camon's, with that look he had, compelling India's genius sad, from the wave through the Lusiad. The murmurs of the storm-cape ocean indrawn in vibrative emotion along the verse, and wild devotion in his wild eyes fantastic shone under the tonsure blown upon by air's celestial calderon. And bold De Vega, who breathed quick verse after verse, till death's old trick put pause to life and rhetoric. And Goethe, with that reaching eye, his soul reached out from far and high, and fell from inner entity. And Shiller, with heroic front, worthy of Plutarch's kiss upon't, too large for wreath of modern want. And Chaucer, with his infantine familiar clasp of things divine, that mark upon his lip is wine. Here Milton's eyes strike piercing dim, the shapes of suns and stars did swim like clouds from them, and granted him God for soul vision. Cowley there, whose active fancy debonair drew straws like amber, foul to fair. Drayton and Brown, with smiles they drew from outward nature, still kept new from their own inward nature true. And Marlowe, Webster, Fletcher, Ben, whose fire heart sowed our furrows when the world was worthy of such men. And Burns, with pungent passionings set in his eyes, deep lyric springs are of the fire mount's issuings. And Shelley, in his white ideal, all statue blind, and Keats, the real Adonis, with the Hymeneal, fresh vernal buds half sunk between his youthful curls, kiss straight and sheen in his Rome grave by Venus' queen. And poor proud Byron, sad as grave, and salt as life, forlornly brave, and quivering with the dart he drave. And visionary Coleridge, who did sweep his thoughts as angels do their wings with cadence up the blue. These poets faced, and many more, the lighted altar looming o'er, the clouds of incense dim and hoar, and all their faces in the lull of natural things looked wonderful, with life and death and deathless rule, all still as stone, and yet intense, as if by spirit's vehemence that stone were carved, and not by sense. But where the heart of each should beat, there seemed a wound instead of it, from whence the blood dropped to their feet. Drop after drop dropped heavily, as century follows century into the deep eternity. Then said the lady, and her word came distant, as wide waves were stirred between her and the ear that heard. World's use is cold, world's love is vain, world's cruelty is bitter bane, but pain is not the fruit of pain. Hearken, O poet, whom I led from the dark wood. Dismissing dread, now hear this angel in my stead. His organ's clavier strikes along these poets' hearts, sonorous, strong. They give him without count of wrong a diapason whence to guide up to God's feet from these who died, an anthem fully glorified, whereat God's blessing, Ibarak, breathes back this music, folds it back upon the earth in vapory rack, and men walk in it, crying, Lo, the world is wider, and we know the very heavens look brighter so. The stars move stately around the edge of the silver spheres, and give in pledge their light for nobler privilege. No little flower but joys or grieves, full life in rustling in the sheaves, full spirit sweeps the forest leaves. So works this music on the earth. God so admits it, sends it forth to add another worth to worth. A new creation bloom that rounds the old creation and expounds his beautiful in tuneful sounds. Now hearken. Then the poet gazed upon the angel glorious-faced, whose hand majestically raised floated across the organ keys, like a pale moon o'er murmuring seas, with no touch, but with influences. Then rose and fell, with swell and swooned, of shapeless noises wandering round a concord which at last they found. Those mystic keys, the tones were mixed, dim, faint, and thrilled and throbbed betwixt the incomplete and the unfixed. And therein mighty minds were heard, in mighty musings inly stirred, and struggling outward for a word, until these surges, having run this way and that, gave out as one an Aphrodite of sweet tune, a harmony that, finding vent upward in grand ascension went, winged to a heavenly argument. Upward, like a saint who strips the shroud back from his eyes and lips and rises in apocalypse. A harmony sublime and plain, which cleft as flying swan the rain, throwing the drops off with a strain of her white wing. Those undertones of perplexed chords, and soared at once and struck out from the starry thrones. Their several silver octaves as it passed to God. The music was of divine stature, strong to pass. And those who heard it understood something of life in spirit and blood, something of nature's fair and good. And while it sounded, those great souls did thrill as racers at the goals, and burn in all their aureoles. But she, the lady, as vapor-bound, stood calmly in the joy of sound, like nature with the showers around. And when it ceased, the blood which fell again alone grew audible, tolling the silence as a bell. The sovereign angel lifted high his hand and spake out sovereignly, "Tried poets, hearken and reply. Give me true answers. If we grant that not to suffer is to want the conscience of the jubilant, if ignorance of anguish is but ignorance, and mortals miss far prospects by a level bliss, if as two colours must be viewed in a visible image, mortals should need good and evil to see good. If to speak nobly comprehends to feel profoundly, if the ends of power and suffering nature blends, if poets on the tripod must writhe like the Pythian to make just their oracles and merit trust, if every Vedic word that sweeps to change the world must pale their lips and leave their souls in eclipse, if to search deep the universe must pierce the searcher with the curse, because that bolt, in man's reverse, was shot to the heart of the wood and lies, wedged deepest in the best, if eyes that look for visions and surprise from influent angels must shut down their lids first upon sun and moon, the head asleep upon a stone, if one who did redeem you back by his own loss from final rack did consecrate by touch and track those temporal sorrows, till the taste of brackish waters of the waste is salt with tears he dropped too fast. If all the crowns of earth must wound with prickings of the thorns he found, if saddest sighs swell sweetest sound, what say ye unto this? refuse this baptism in salt water, choose calm breasts, mute lips, and labor loose? Or, O ye gifted givers, ye who give your liberal hearts to me, to make the world this harmony, are ye resigned that they be spent to such world's help? The spirits bent their awful brows and said, Content. Content. It sounded like Amen, said by a choir of mourning men, an affirmation full of pain. And patience I, of glorying and adoration, as a king might seal an oath for governing. Then said the angel, and his face lightened abroad, until the place grew larger for a moment's space. The long aisles flashing out in light, and nave and transept, columns white and arches crossed, being clear to sight, as if the roof were off, and all stood in the noon sun. Lo, I call to other hearts as liberal. This pedal strikes out in the air. My instrument has room to bear still fuller strains and perfecter. Herein is room, and shall be room, while time lasts, for new hearts to come, consummating, while they consume. What living man will bring a gift of his own heart, and help to lift the tune? The race is to the swift. So asked the angel, straight the while. A company came up the aisle, with measured step and sorted smile, cleaving the incense clouds that rise, with winking unaccustomed eyes, and love locks smelling sweet of spice. One bore his head above the rest, as if the world were dispossessed, and one did pillow chin on breast, right languid, and as he should faint, one shook his curls across his paint, and moralized on worldly taint. One, slanting up his face, did wink the salt rheum to the eyelid's brink, to think, O gods, or not to think. Some trod out stealthily and slow, as if the sun would fall in snow, if they walked to instead of fro. And some, with conscious ambling free, did shake their bells right daintily, on hand and foot, for harmony. And some, composing sudden sighs in attitudes of point device, rehearsed impromptu agonies. And when this company drew near, the spirits crowned, it might appear submitted to a ghastly fear. As a sane eye in master passion constrains a maniac to the fashion of hideous maniac imitation, in the least jest, the dropping low of the lid, the wrinkling of the brow, exaggerate with mock and mow. So mastered was that company by the crowned vision utterly, swayed to a maniac mockery. One dulled his eyeballs as they ached with Homer's forehead, though he lacked an inch of any, and one racked his lower lip with restless tooth, as Pindar's rushing words forsooth were pent behind it. One his smooth pink cheeks did rumple passionate like Aeschylus, and tried to prate on trolling tongue of fate and fate. One set her eyes like Sappho's, or any light woman's. One forbore like Dante, or any man as poor in mirth, to let a smile undo his hard-shut lips. And one that drew sour humours from his mother blew his sunken cheeks out to the size of most unnatural jollities, because Anacreon looked jest-wise. So with the rest, it was a sight a great world laughter would requite, of great world wrath with equal right. Out came a speaker from the crowd to speak for all in sleek and proud exordial periods, while he bowed his knee before the angel. Thus, O angel, who last called for us, we bring thee service emulous. Fit service from sufficient soul, hand service to receive world's dole, lip service in world's ear to roll, adjusted concords, soft enow, to hear the wine cups passing through, and not too grave to spoil the show. Thou, certes, when thou askest more, O sapient angel, leanest o'er the window's sill of metaphor, to give our hearts up, fie, that rage barbaric antedates the age. It is not done on any stage. Because your skald or gleeman went with 7 or 9 stringed instrument upon his back, must ours be bent? We are not pilgrims, by your leave, no, nor yet martyrs. If we grieve, it is to rhyme, to summer eve, and if we labour, it shall be as suiteth best with our degree in after-dinner reverie. More yet, that speaker would have said, poising between his smiles fair-fed, each separate phrase till finished. But all the foreheads of those born and dead true poets flashed with scorn betwixt the bay-leaves, round them worn. I jetted such brave fire that they the new come shrank and paled away like leaden ashes when the day strikes on the hearth. A spirit blast, a presence known by power, at last took them up mutely. They had passed. And he, our pilgrim poet, saw only their places in deep awe. What time the angel's smile did draw his gazing upward, smiling on, the angel in the angel shone, revealing glory in benison. Till, ripened in the light which shut the poet in, his spirit mute dropped sudden as a perfect fruit. He fell before the angel's feet, saying, "If what is true is sweet, in something I may compass it. For where my worthiness is poor, my will stands richly at the door, to pay shortcomings evermore. Accept me, therefore, not for price, not for pride, my sacrifice is tendered. For my soul is nice, and will beat down those dusty seeds of bearded corn, if she succeeds in soaring while the covey feeds. I soar. I am drawn up like the lark to its white cloud, so high my mark, albeit my wing is small and dark. I ask no wages, seek no fame. Sow me for shroud, round face, and name, God's banner of the oriflamme. I only would have leave to loose, in tears and blood, if so he choose, mine inward music out to use. I would only be spent in pain and loss perchance, but not in vain upon the sweetness of that strain. Only project beyond the bound of mine own life, so lost and found, my voice, and live on in its sound. Only embrace and be embraced by fiery ends, whereby to waste, and light God's future with my past. The angel's smile grew more divine, the mortal's speaking, eye. Its shine swelled fuller, like a choir note fine, till the broad glory round his brow did vibrate with the light below. But what he said, I do not know. Nor know I if the man who prayed rose up accepted, unforbade, from the church floor where he was laid. Nor if a listening life did run through the king poets, one by one, rejoicing in a worthy son. My soul, which might have seen, grew blind by what it looked on. I can find no certain count of things behind. I saw alone, dim, white and grand, as in a dream, the angel's hand stretched forth in gesture of command straight through the haze, and so as erst a strain more noble than the first mused in the organ and outburst. With giant march from floor to roof rose the full notes, now parted off in pauses massively aloof, like measured thunders, now rejoined in concords of mysterious kind, which fused together sense and mind, now flashing sharp on sharp along, exultant in a mounting throng, now dying off to a low song, fed upon minors, wave-like sounds re-eddying into silver rounds, enlarging liberty with bounds. And every rhythm that seemed to close survived in confluent underflows, symphonious with the next that rose. Thus the whole strain, being multiplied and greatened, with its glorified wings shot abroad from side to side, waved backward as a wind might wave a broken mist, and with as brave wild roaring, arch and architrave, aisle, transept, column, marble wall, then swelling outward, prodigal of aspiration beyond thrall, soared and drew up with it the whole of this sad vision, as a soul is raised by a thought, and as a scroll of bright devices is unrolled, still upward with a gradual gold, so rose the vision manifold, angel and organ, and the round of spirits solemnized and crowned, while the freed clouds of incense wound, ascending, following in their track, and glimmering faintly, like the rack of the moon in her own light cast back. And as the solemn dream withdrew, the lady's kiss did fall anew, cold on the poet's brow as dew. And that same kiss would bound him first, beyond the senses, now reversed its own law, and most subtly pierced his spirit with a sense of things sensual and present, vanishings of glory with aeolian wings, struck him and passed. The lady's face did melt back in the chrysoprase of the orient morning sky that was yet clear of lark, and there and so she melted as a star might do, still smiling as she melted, slow, smiling so slow. He seemed to see her smile, the last thing, gloriously beyond her, far as memory. Then he looked round. He was alone. He lay before the breaking sun, as Jacob at the Bethel stone.